It happened on a stormy night when the river roared louder than church bells on Sunday morning. Folks say you could hear the thunder roll clear across the valley as Eli, that barefoot boy with a heart too big for his pocket, dove into the wild water for the girl who lived behind iron gates. Lanterns swung, voices shouted, and the town held its breath as fate tangled their young lives tighter than a fisherman's net. That night wasn't just about saving a life. It was about defying a world that said they didn't belong together. And child, if you lean in close, you'll feel the echoes of that moment still hanging in the warm southern air. The sun was just beginning to set over the quiet town of Willow Creek when Eli heard the sound. It was sharp. It was strange. It cut through the hum of the evening like a cry from the woods. Eli paused where he stood near the old wooden fence, squinting toward the narrow road that curved through the trees. His shirt was worn thin, and his feet were dusty from walking back from the farm where he worked every day. He didn't have much in this world, but he had ears that caught danger like a hound. Then he saw it. A shiny black car had skidded off the road and was leaning halfway into the creek. Smoke curled from its hood, and the back wheel was still spinning slow, like a broken clock hand. Inside the car, through the cracked window, Eli saw a girl pounding weakly at the glass. Her hair was golden like corn, and her dress looked like something from a fancy store. She was trapped. Without thinking twice, Eli leapt the fence. His heart beat fast, but his legs moved faster. The mud was thick, and the water was cold as he splashed his way toward the car. The door wouldn't open, so he grabbed a rock, slammed it against the window and shouted, "Hold on!" The glass shattered, and water rushed in. He pulled the girl through, held her tight, and dragged her to the bank just as the car gave one last groan and slid deeper into the water. The girl coughed, then looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. He didn't know her name yet, but in that moment, something started, like a spark in dry grass. Something neither of them could stop. The girl's name was Megan. She lived in the biggest white house on the hill, the one folks in town always whispered about. Her father, Mr. Thompson, owned half the land around Willow Creek. Her mama wore pearls to breakfast. They had drivers, gardeners, and even someone who walked their dogs. Eli had seen her once before from afar, when he was delivering eggs to the market. She didn't see him then, but now, she couldn't take her eyes off the boy who pulled her from the water. "Are you hurt?" Eli asked softly. He brushed mud from her face with careful fingers. "I'm cold," she said, shivering. "And my ankle hurts." Eli didn't have much to offer, but he had his old jacket. He wrapped it around her shoulders, lifted her in his arms, and carried her down the path toward the road. A truck passed by, and the driver jumped out to help. Within minutes, news spread fast. Rich Mr. Thompson's daughter had been saved by the poor boy from the edge of town. When they reached the big house, lights flashed, voices rose, and Megan's mother rushed out crying. But Mr. Thompson didn't look happy. He stood on the porch with his arms crossed and eyes sharp as nails. He looked Eli up and down like a man looking at mud on his boots. "You brought her back," he said slowly. "Thank you." His voice was cold, not thankful, not warm. Megan clung to Eli's hand as they tried to take her inside. "Don't go," she whispered. "Please." But Eli knew his place. He let go of her hand and stepped back into the shadows, his heart thumping like a drum. Something about Mr. Thompson's stare told him trouble was coming. That night, Eli lay on his small bed in the tiny room behind his mama's house. The moonlight fell through the cracks in the window, drawing silver lines on the floor. He kept seeing Megan's face, the way she held his hand, the way she whispered, "Don't go." His mama came in quietly, carrying a bowl of warm soup. "I heard what happened," she said. "You did a brave thing, Eli. But remember, boy, people like them don't mix with people like us." Eli didn't say a word. He knew she was right, but deep inside, something stubborn rose in him like a tree root pushing through the ground. He didn't save her because she was rich. He saved her because it was right. Meanwhile, up on the hill, Megan couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment Eli broke the window, the way he held her. Her father had warned her never to speak to those boys from the other side. But her heart didn't listen to rules. She snuck out of her room, looked down the hill, and whispered to the wind. "Thank you, Eli," the crickets sang. The night wrapped the town in quiet. But in that quiet, two hearts were awake, reaching across a world that wanted to keep them apart. The next day, Eli was working at the farm when a fancy car pulled up. Two men in dark suits stepped out, looking out of place among the chickens and dusty fields. One of them handed Eli a brown envelope. "From Mr. Thompson," he said. Inside was a folded piece of paper with neat handwriting. "Thank you for saving my daughter. Here is a reward. Do not come near our family again." Underneath the note was money, more than Eli had ever seen in his life. His hands trembled as he stared at it. His heart sank. It wasn't a thank you gift. It was a wall, a warning. That evening, Megan tried to find Eli. She ran to the road where she had crashed, hoping to see him, but he wasn't there. She asked the driver to take her to the farm, but her father's men stopped her. "Your father said no," they warned. Megan frowned. "He saved my life. I just want to thank him." But power spoke louder than her small voice. She watched the sun set over the fields, feeling something she couldn't name. Something like sadness, something like longing. Eli, from a distance, watched her car disappear. He folded the note and tucked it in his pocket. The money lay untouched on the table. His mama said, "Take it, Eli. We need it." But Eli only stared at the night sky. He knew the money couldn't fill the emptiness growing inside him. A week passed. The town kept talking about the accident. Megan's friends whispered about the poor boy who was brave. Some said he was lucky. Some said he was foolish. Eli tried to stay busy, but every road seemed to lead back to that creek. One afternoon, while gathering firewood near the forest, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned and saw her, Megan, standing in a white dress, her golden hair tied with a blue ribbon. She had run away from the house, barefoot, just to find him. "I knew I'd find you here," she said, breathless. "You didn't answer my letter." "Letter?" Eli asked, confused. "I left one by the fence near the farm," she said. "Didn't you see it?" He shook his head. "Someone must have taken it." Megan's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to see you again." Eli felt warmth spread through his chest. "I'm here," he said softly, "and I'm not going anywhere." But just as she smiled, the sound of horses echoed down the path. Mr. Thompson's men were coming. Megan gasped. "They followed me." Eli grabbed her hand. "This way." They ran through the trees, their hearts pounding together. The woods whispered around them. The men shouted behind. Felt like the whole world was chasing them. For a brief moment, they hid behind an old oak tree, their faces close, breaths mingling. "I don't want to lose you," Megan whispered. "You won't," Eli said, though he didn't know how he'd keep that promise. The sound of hooves grew louder, like thunder rolling closer. Eli held Megan's hand tighter, pulling her deeper into the woods. The branches brushed their faces, the leaves whispered secrets, and the air smelled like damp earth and wildflowers. Megan's heart pounded so hard she thought the men could hear it. "Over here!" one of the men shouted. Eli's eyes darted around. He knew these woods better than anyone. He had spent summers climbing trees and chasing rabbits here. He led Megan to a hollow between two giant roots of an old oak. "Stay here," he whispered. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Megan nodded, her eyes wide. She trusted him. She didn't even know why, but she did. Eli stepped out and ran the other way, snapping twigs on purpose to lead the men away. They shouted and followed him. He darted through the undergrowth, his breath coming fast. He slipped down a muddy slope, landed hard, but didn't stop. After what felt like forever, the woods grew quiet again. He made his way back to Megan. She was sitting where he left her, hugging her knees. When she saw him, she jumped up and threw her arms around him. "I thought they caught you," she whispered. "Not today," he said with a small grin. They walked toward the edge of the woods where the sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in orange and gold. For a moment the world felt small and theirs. But far away, Mr. Thompson stood on the porch of his house, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. He wasn't done with Eli. Not by a long shot. The next morning, the whole town buzzed with talk. Someone had seen Megan and Eli together in the woods. The butcher's wife told the tailor. The tailor told the schoolteacher. By noon, the story reached Mr. Thompson's ears. He slammed his fist on the table. "That boy is meddling where he shouldn't," he growled. "I warned him once. He didn't listen. He will now." He sent men to the farm with a message. Eli was summoned to the big house on the hill. When he arrived, the marble floors gleamed under his dusty boots. The walls smelled of polished wood and perfume. It was a world so different from his that it almost hurt to breathe inside it. Mr. Thompson sat in a big chair like a king. "Eli," he began slowly, "I thanked you for saving my daughter. I gave you money. I told you to stay away. But you didn't. Now, hear me clearly. If you care for your family, you will keep your distance. If not, things can get difficult for poor folk like you." Eli's hands curled into fists. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said. "She came to me." "She's a child," Mr. Thompson snapped. "She doesn't know better. But I do. And I won't let a farm boy ruin her future." Eli felt the sting of the words like a slap. He turned and walked out, his chest burning with something fierce, something like pride, something like hurt. Outside, Megan stood by the staircase. "Eli," she whispered. "What did he say?" He forced a smile. "Nothing I can't handle." But inside he knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a storm. That evening Eli sat with his mama on the porch. The air was heavy and quiet. Crickets chirped. Fireflies floated like tiny lanterns. His mama could read his face like a book. "What happened, boy?" she asked. "They want me to stay away from Megan," he said. She sighed. "Eli, that's their world. They don't want ours mixing with theirs. It's how it's always been." "But it ain't right," Eli said, his voice trembling. "I saved her life. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for anything. Why do they treat me like I'm dirt?" His mama touched his arm. "You've got a good heart. But good hearts get bruised when they fight against walls too tall." Eli looked out at the fields, dark and endless. "Then maybe I'll learn to climb." Far away, in her big room, Megan pressed her ear to the window, listening to the wind. She felt trapped in a golden cage. Her father locked her in the house, took away her letters, and warned the maids to watch her. But she kept a secret. Under her pillow was a small map she drew of the woods. And on that map, there was a place she marked with a star. "Where Eli saved me," she whispered into the night. "I'll find you again." The days turned into weeks. Megan tried to sneak out twice, but her father caught her both times. Each time, the rules grew tighter. Guards watched the gates. Her carriage was locked. Even her friends were told not to mention Eli's name. But hearts don't forget. One afternoon, Eli went to the market to sell vegetables. As he lifted a basket onto the table, a small folded note slipped into his hand. He turned quickly. A maid from the Thompson house hurried away through the crowd. Eli opened the note. It was Megan's handwriting. "Meet me by the creek at sunset. I have to see you. Please." His pulse quickened. He folded the note and tucked it into his shirt. That evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky pink and gold, he walked to the creek. She was already there, barefoot, with her hair tied back and her dress muddy at the hem. "I missed you," she said softly. He wanted to say 100 things, but only managed, "Me too." They sat by the water, their reflections dancing on the surface. They talked about dreams, his of traveling beyond Willow Creek, hers of escaping the cage she lived in. The more they talked, the more their worlds blended, like two rivers meeting. But somewhere beyond the trees, a shadow moved. Someone was watching. The man watching from the woods worked for Mr. Thompson. He saw the way Megan leaned close, how Eli's hand brushed hers, how their laughter echoed softly. He didn't stay to hear their words. He ran back to the house to report. By morning, The house was in an uproar. Mr. Thompson's face turned red with anger. "She's disobeyed me for the last time," he shouted. He ordered Megan to pack her bags. "You're going to the boarding school in the city. Tomorrow." Megan froze. "No, Papa. Please. This is not a discussion," he snapped. That night, she cried into her pillow. She thought about the creek, about Eli's gentle eyes, about the way his voice made her feel safe. She wrote one last letter and gave it to the maid she trusted most. "Give this to him," she begged. "Please. It's my only chance." The maid nodded. But Eli never got that letter. The men at the gate caught the maid and took the letter straight to Mr. Thompson. He read it, tore it in half, and burned it in the fire. The next morning, Megan was taken away in a black car. She pressed her face to the window, looking back at the fields, at the creek, at the world she didn't want to leave. Eli saw the car pass from the distance. He didn't know where she was going. All he knew was that she was gone, and his heart broke in a way that no one could see, but everyone could feel in the quiet air of Willow Creek. The days after Megan left felt like someone had taken the color out of Willow Creek. The sun still rose, the roosters still crowed, and the fields still swayed with wind, but for Eli everything seemed quieter, emptier. He woke before dawn and worked until after dark, trying to bury his thoughts in chores. But no matter how many baskets he carried or fences he mended, her voice kept echoing in his mind. His mama noticed. She saw the way he sat on the porch at night, staring down the road. She didn't ask questions. Some kinds of pain don't need questions, they just need quiet. One evening, as he walked by the creek, he saw something half buried in the mud. It was a blue ribbon. Her ribbon, the one she wore that day in the woods. He picked it up slowly, brushed off the dirt, and tied it around his wrist. It was the only piece of her he had left. Meanwhile, in the city, Megan's world was nothing like the soft hills of Willow Creek. The boarding school was strict. Cold stone walls, tall gates, and teachers with eyes like hawks. She had lessons from sunrise to sunset and rules that wrapped around her like chains. She wrote letters to Eli every night but didn't know where to send them. She kept them hidden under her mattress, tied together with string. She looked out her dorm window at the stars and whispered, "Wait for me." Weeks passed, then months. The seasons changed. Summer turned to autumn, and the trees in Willow Creek wore golden coats. Eli grew taller, stronger. His hands became rough from work, but his heart stayed soft. One chilly evening, a traveling merchant stopped by the farm. He carried news, as merchants often did. "Heard the Thompsons' girl is making quite the name for herself in the city," he said with a grin. "Pretty little thing, smart too. Folks say she's got suitors lining up like ants to sugar." Eli's chest tightened. He forced a smile, nodded politely, but inside, something crumbled. He walked out to the fields alone. The wind was cold. The ribbon on his wrist fluttered like a lonely flag. Far away, Megan sat in a big hall, dressed in a fine gown for a school dinner. Young men from wealthy families came to visit. They spoke politely, bowed, and smiled at her, but she couldn't hear them. All she heard was the sound of water rushing through the creek, the crunch of leaves under bare feet, and the voice of a boy saying, "You won't lose me." She held her fork, pretending to smile, but her heart was still tied to that small town she left behind. One night, near the end of winter, Eli received a visitor. A young man from town brought a letter with a red seal. "It's from the Thompsons' lawyer," he said nervously. Eli opened it slowly. The letter was neat and cold. "Mr. Eli Brown, this is to inform you that Miss Megan Thompson is to be engaged to the son of a prominent businessman in the city. You are hereby advised to cease any attempts at contact. Failure to comply will result in legal action." The words hit Eli like a hammer. His hands shook. He stared at the letter until the ink blurred with his tears. His mama found him sitting outside, the letter on the ground. "What's wrong?" she asked. He just whispered, "They're taking her away for good." She wrapped her arms around him, rocking him slowly like she did when he was a boy. "Some things, Eli," she said softly, "can't be held no matter how tight your grip, But Eli wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Spring came, bringing warm winds and the scent of wildflowers. One afternoon, as Eli worked near the road, a carriage stopped. A familiar face peeked through the window. It was the maid who once carried Megan's notes. She handed him a folded piece of paper. "I kept this safe," she whispered. "It's from her. I couldn't give it to you before. They would have fired me." Eli's heart pounded as he unfolded it. Megan's handwriting danced across the page. "Eli, they're sending me away. I don't know where, and I don't know for how long. But please don't forget me. Don't let them erase what we had. I'll find a way back. I promise." The paper smelled faintly of lavender. Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He closed his eyes, letting the sound of the wind carry her promise into his bones. That night, Eli made a decision. He didn't have money. He didn't have power. But he had courage. And sometimes, courage is enough to start a fire in the dark. Eli began saving every coin he earned. He worked longer hours, helped neighboring farms, fixed fences, carried sacks, chopped wood, anything that paid. He had a quiet plan growing in his heart, to find Megan. At the same time, Megan was preparing for something she didn't want. Her father had written, "Your engagement ceremony will be held at the end of summer. Make the family proud." She crumpled the letter, tears stinging her eyes. That night, she ran to the edge of the school garden and stared at the stars. "If you can hear me, Eli," she whispered, "don't give up." Back in Willow Creek, Eli looked up at the same stars. He didn't hear her words, but he felt something stir inside. A pull, like the tug of the creek's current. Every night, he tied the blue ribbon tighter around his wrist and whispered, "I'm coming for you." Summer crept into Willow Creek like a warm blanket, wrapping the fields in golden light. The sky was wide and endless, and the cicadas sang their steady songs in the trees. Eli worked from sunrise to sunset, saving every coin in a small wooden box under the floorboard of his room. Each clink of a new coin was like a heartbeat. Each day brought him closer to the road beyond Willow Creek. He didn't tell anyone what he planned, not even his mama, but she saw the fire in his eyes and didn't ask questions. Some dreams are too fragile to speak out loud. One evening, after a long day, Eli sat by the creek. The water flowed gently, carrying little leaves downstream like travelers on a journey. He held Megan's last letter in his hands, worn at the edges from being read so many times. He whispered to the water, "I'm coming, Megan. I ain't giving up." In the city, Megan's days were filled with lessons and rehearsals for the engagement dinner. She wore dresses she didn't choose, smiled at people she didn't like, and danced with a boy she didn't love. At night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining the soft wind through the trees back home, imagining Eli's kind eyes and the sound of his voice saying, "You won't lose me." Two hearts in two different worlds, still beating to the same rhythm. One morning, news spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. A traveling fair had arrived in the next town. Wagons, musicians, and traders from the city were passing through. Eli's heart jumped. If he could join the caravan, he might make his way to the city without needing a fortune. He packed his few belongings in a small sack, his clothes, a bit of food, Megan's letter, and the blue ribbon around his wrist. Before dawn, he went to his mama's room. She was already awake, as if she'd known. "Where you going, boy?" she asked softly. Eli took a deep breath. "I've got to find her, Mama." She looked at him long and hard, tears glistening in her eyes. "You got your daddy's stubborn heart," she whispered. "If you're going, go with your head high, and don't forget who you are." She pressed a folded piece of cloth into his hand. Inside were the few coins she'd been saving for years. "Take it," she said, "for the road." He hugged her tight, the kind of hug that says 1,000 things without a single word. Then he set off, his feet carrying him toward the unknown, his heart carrying something even stronger, hope. The road was long. The sun burned during the day, and the nights grew cold. Eli walked beside the fair wagons, earning his keep by helping set up tents, carrying boxes and running errands. The caravan was noisy and full of life. People played fiddles, cooked over fires, told stories under the stars. Eli listened but spoke little. His mind was always on Megan. One night, as the fair stopped in a small town near the city, Eli heard two merchants talking by the fire. "Big event in the city soon," one said. "Some rich girl's engagement to a business heir. It's supposed to be the talk of the season." "Who?" the other asked. "Thompson's daughter," the man replied. "Pretty thing. Her father's throwing a feast big enough to feed half the city." Eli's hands froze mid-task. He didn't need to hear more. He knew who they were talking about. His heart began to pound like thunder in his chest. Megan's engagement wasn't just planned. It was happening soon. He looked up at the night sky and whispered, "I have to get there in time." In the city, the Thompson mansion was buzzing with preparations. Chandeliers were polished, musicians rehearsed, cooks prepared grand meals, and seamstresses stitched gowns late into the night. Megan stood in front of a mirror as maids fitted her engagement dress. It was beautiful, silky white with tiny pearls along the sleeves. But to her it felt like a chain. She stared at herself and whispered, "This isn't me." The boy she was to marry, Daniel, was polite and handsome in the way rich boys often are. He spoke of business and travel, never once asking her what she loved. She smiled when she was supposed to, but inside, her heart screamed for the woods, the creek, and a boy with kind eyes and muddy boots. That night, she sneaked out to the balcony and stared at the road beyond the city. "Eli," she whispered to the wind, "if you're out there, please don't give up on me." And far away, on the edge of the city, Eli was making his way through crowded streets, guided by nothing but her name and the hope burning inside him. Eli had never seen a place like the city. The buildings were tall, the streets crowded, and the air thick with noise. Horses clattered on cobblestones, vendors shouted, and carriages rushed by. He held his small sack close and tried not to look lost. But he was a boy from the fields in a place built for men in suits. He spent his first night sleeping under a bridge, listening to the water run beneath him. The next day, he asked around until someone pointed to a grand house on the hill. "That's the Thompson place," a fruit seller said, raising an eyebrow. "Rich folks. Guards at every gate. You won't get close." Eli looked up at the mansion. It was beautiful but cold, like a shiny stone with no warmth. He didn't care about the guards. He cared about the girl inside. That evening, as the sun dipped low, he found a tree behind the fence that led toward the back gardens. It was tall, but so was his determination. He climbed, branch by branch, until he could see the lit windows of the house. He didn't know what he'd do yet. All he knew was that he was closer than ever. Somewhere inside that house, Megan was looking at the same sunset, her hands pressed against the glass, whispering a name the wind carried through the trees. The days turned into months, and the seasons rolled on like the slow river by the edge of town. Eli worked at the dock from sunrise to sunset, his hands rough like tree bark and his heart heavy like a rain-soaked log. Every night, he sat on the old porch of his mama's wooden house, staring at the stars. Sometimes, if the wind blew just right, he swore he could still hear Megan's soft laughter floating through the air like a song he once knew by heart. Megan, far away in her family's big white house on the hill, was living a life that didn't belong to her. Her parents watched her every move. They made sure she went to proper schools, wore fine dresses, and smiled at fancy people. But behind those polite smiles, her heart whispered one name, Eli. She kept a tiny smooth river stone in her pocket, the one he gave her that day by the water. She touched it whenever she felt lonely, like a secret promise no one could take from her. One night, a storm rolled through the town. Thunder cracked across the sky like the sound of splitting wood. The river rose wild and angry, spilling over its banks. The town bell rang. Someone had fallen into the water near the bridge. Eli didn't think twice. He ran barefoot through the rain, heart pounding, not knowing who it was. The water was dark and fierce, but he dove in anyway. That's who he was. That's who he'd always been. Through the crashing waves he found her, Megan. She had tried to run away from home and had slipped off the muddy path. Her fine dress was soaked, her hair clung to her face, and her eyes met his in that moment, wild, frightened, and full of the old spark. He pulled her close and kicked against the roaring current. It felt like the whole world was pulling them apart, but Eli held on with everything he had. By the time they reached the bank, both were shivering, their breaths coming in gasps. The townsfolk gathered with lanterns, faces pale. Her parents arrived, shouting her name. When they saw Eli holding her, their faces hardened like cold stone. They thanked him, but their eyes carried the same walls that had always stood between them. The next morning, men came to Eli's house. They gave him money, a thick envelope, and told him to leave town. "For your own good," they said. "For everyone's good." He didn't argue. He just looked toward the hill where Megan lived, whispered her name into the wind, and walked away. Megan watched from her window as his figure grew smaller down the dusty road. She pressed the river stone to her lips and cried quietly, the kind of cry that comes from deep inside. Her parents believed they'd saved her future. But she knew the truth. Some goodbyes don't end anything. They echo forever. Years later, folks still talked about Eli and Megan on warm southern nights. They'd sit on porches, rocking chairs creaking, fireflies dancing, and someone would say, "Remember that boy who saved that girl twice? Once from death, and once from a life without truth." And the story would roll on like the river, soft and strong, because some love stories don't fade. They turn into legends whispered under starlit skies.